Oh, howdy all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile build discussion. Cobra Lash is one of the new skills that's being introduced in the Blight League 3.8 in about 10 hours time, and it's one of the most exciting skills that has been introduced to the game recently, partly because the numbers on it are just so damn good. So let's have a quick look at the Cobra Lash gem itself. Cobra Lash is 50% physical to chaos conversion. It deals 125% of base damage at gem level 20, and has 120% of base attack speed. So multiplying these together, you get 150.48% of base damage. Then on top of that, you've got the effects of effectively a level 16 added chaos damage on an attack that is somewhat ranged and that has intrinsic 5 chains. Then add even more to it, you've got 40% chance to poison on hit, you've got 50% to damage over time multiplier for poison from crits, and you've got 30% increased critical strike chance. Needless to say, this is a skill that looks pretty damn impressive. Now, the Assassin is the Ascendancy that screams at me to build around, to be built in conjunction with this skill. The Assassin has synergies with critical strikes, it has synergies with poison, and it is the all-out offense build that I think is designed for this skill. So, having a quick look at the Assassin Ascendancy, I think there's 3 clear choices of Ascendancy nodes that you're definitely going to take. So you're going to take Mistweaver, which is a very powerful defensive node. You're going to take Opportunistic, because immunity to reflect on critical strikes. Reflect on critical strikes will kill you. It will kill you a lot. This removes that from being a problem, as well as that the node is good on its own merits, even without that second line there. So 20% increased move speed if you've killed recently is phenomenal. And you just think of the difference between 15% move speed boots and 35% move speed boots. It's just totally on a different world. Additionally, one of the most powerful defenses in this game is not getting hit in the first place. Noxious Strike is a no-brainer. We're going to be taking this. 40% chance to poison on hit gets us very easily to the magic 100%. 50% increased damage with poison, but then there's these 2 magic lines: 25% to damage over time multiplier for poison, and 5% increased poison duration for each poison you've inflicted recently. If you're dishing out poisons fast, one of the best ways to scale them is by increasing their duration, and Noxious Strike does that. You're going to get a 4th Ascendancy option as well when you complete the Eternal Labyrinth. I suggest Toxic Delivery, but I don't think it's a clear choice. You're not wrong if you don't take Toxic Delivery, whereas I think you are just objectively wrong if you don't take these 3. All the other choices, Ambush and Assassinate, Unstable Infusion, and Toxic Delivery are all compelling choices, and I'm going to leave that decision up to you, but if you're not sure, default to taking Toxic Delivery. In terms of the passive tree, I will provide another warning here that this build is a little bit light on life. If you're playing in hardcore, then I would suggest that you make a few sacrifices, skip some damage, in order to pick up some of the not so amazing various life node clusters that are around. You've got the Heart of Oak and these clusters here in the start of Ranger. They're an option. You can get to them with, you'll get a little bit under you'll get about 3.5% per life per point invested if you path to there. Alternately, you've got the option of taking the Melding cluster, which is a pretty mediocre cluster, but might just be what you needed. If you're in hardcore, you need to make those decisions. If you're in softcore, then I think you've got enough life to get started. And you'll see that this is set up for a level 80 character at the moment, so there's still 20 more passive tree points to earn. Once you get there, of course, you can pick up some of the extra life nodes, or if you take a bit of an approach of you're willing to die every now and again in order to speed up your clearing, then of course you can take more damage. That's entirely up to you. This tree is set up for level 80 and is set up on the basis that you want to be doing a lot of damage at level 80. So in terms of how you scale poison damage, there is the stat Poison Damage Over Time Multiplier, which is also Chaos Damage Over Time Multiplier, or Ailment Damage Over Time Multiplier. Any of these are one angle of scaling for poison damage. Now, critical strikes give you a lot of sources of additional poison damage over time multiplier. I don't really go into that in this build. I'm not really trying to scale critical strikes. You could certainly modify this if you wanted to do so, but I feel that the build is squishy enough already that I'm a bit hesitant to invest a lot of passive tree points into critical strikes as well. The second axis on which you can scale your poison damage is by increasing chaos damage and poison damage and ailment damage. Most of this is going to come from gear, and we'll come to that later, but stockpile your corroded fossils because you're going to be using a lot of them. Next up, there is Poison Duration. Poison Duration is really strong, and you've got the single best source of it in the game as an assassin, a Noxious Strike. If you have inflicted 30 poisons in the last 4 seconds, then you're getting 150% increased poison duration. If you've got 50% increased poison duration from other sources, then this is essentially doubling your poison duration. And because poison deals a fixed amount of damage per second, an amount of damage per second that's based upon the size of the hit and various other factors, doubling the duration doubles the total amount of damage that poison instance will inflict. So for that reason, poison duration is really good, but you do have quite a bit of it. You also can scale poison by scaling your poison chance, but we're going to very quickly get to 100%, and that is a hard cap. So, in terms of various options for gearing, how are you going to gear this character? In terms of flasks, you're going to want to find a Coralito signature unique flask when you can. This gives you a huge increase to the duration of your poisons. You're also going to find yourself an Atziri's Promise Flask, which should be available by day 2 of the league for a modest price. When I say a modest price, I mean maybe you're paying 5 chaos on day 2, maybe you're paying 10. You should be able to afford it on day 2 if you're the sort of person that gets to maps quickly. If not, no drama. By the time you get to maps, the market will be completely flooded with Atziri's Promise Flasks. You'll be able to pick one up for an Alchemy Orb or 2. You'll need at least 1 Instant Life Flask and at least 1 Quicksilver, and the rest of your flasks can be to taste, especially until you can pick up Coralito Signature. Just go with anything until that point. You must have an anti-bleed flask somewhere, and other immunity flasks are very useful, especially having a flask that provides immunity to curses is really helpful as well. At the moment, I can't really say whether you're going to need a mana flask or not. Ideally, you don't want to be using a mana flask, but you might find that you need to. In terms of your core skill gems, you're going to want to attach Cobra Lash to Greater Multiple Projectiles, to Nightblade Support, to Unbound Ailments, to Deadly Ailments, and to Vile Toxins. Now, you're not going to be able to use all of those while you're leveling, so just use any subset of 4 of them that you can manage. Cobra Lash you'll get really early, the others you'll be able to pick up over time. And so you can then, start going from transitioning from a 3-link to a 4-link, which ideally you'll transition to a 4-link about the middle of Act 3. Then from a 4-link you want to transition to a 5-link somewhere in maps, and then from a 5-link to a 6-link, probably somewhere about the time that you're getting into red maps. Of course, you may end up picking up Tabula Rasa at some point if you get lucky. And if you do find a Tabula Rasa, fantastic, just go with all 6 gems at that point. For bosses, remove Greater Multiple Projectiles and add Poison Support, which will be a 39% damage multiplier against bosses. That's assuming that you've got gem level 20 on Poison. The 60% chance to poison that is part of Poison Support is totally wasted, but if we flick over to the gems that have been reworked, then you'll see that Poison Support has had its numbers increased considerably, and there you can see 39% more damage with poison. That is phenomenal, and that is a really compelling replacement for Greater Multiple Projectiles. In terms of mana reservations, Malevolence will multiply your damage. Vile Grace is a solid defense, both Grace as an always-on defensive aura, and then Vile Grace as an oh shit, I am surrounded and I am in real trouble emergency button, or alternately as something you can fire off before engaging a boss. Alternately, if you're willing to sacrifice the defense provided by Grace, you can use Blasphemy linked to Despair. Despair is a powerful curse that increases the amount of chaos damage that nearby enemies will take. Additionally, it reduces their chaos resistance. It causes them to take increased damage from damage over time effects, and it adds chaos damage to hits against cursed enemies. All of these are really strong effects. However, be aware that bosses, i.e. the monsters that are likely to require the most hits to kill, will have a degree of resilience against curse effects. And so for that reason, at the times that you need despair most, it's not going to let you down completely, but it's also not going to be as good as you might have otherwise hoped. I'd still seriously consider using it, and this is going to be something that you'll have to test out yourself to ascertain whether it's better to have the defense provided by Grace or to have the offensive power provided by a Blasphemy Despair. In terms of utility skills, you're going to want to use Blood Rage. Blood Rage will tremendously increase your attack speed and will provide you with non-stop frenzy charges while you're killing monsters. You're also going to want to have Wither linked to Spell Totem support and linked to faster casting. What this does, this is the classic Wither Totem setup. It will debuff enemies. You're only going to cast this spell when you've got a single target enemy that you think is going to take a lot of hits. Drop down a Wither Totem and it will wither away at your opponent's chaos resistance. You can then start stacking up your poisons on it and get in some really, truly mean damage. You have the option of using a Golem skill. I kind of advise people not to use Golems, mostly because they do provide a genuine defensive or offensive benefit, depending on which one you go with, most of the time, but then in certain circumstances, they just surprise you and get you killed. Some ways that your Golems can backfire really badly. When you zone into an incursion, you will often get your Golem will trigger enemies to start attacking it, and then often will end up resulting in you getting killed. Additionally, Golems can also be real trouble on maps where monsters have projectiles that chain. So for that reason, think carefully about using a Golem. You may decide that the benefits are worth the costs. You will definitely, however, need a guard skill, and because we're taking Phase Acrobatics, which is a powerful defensive node over here, and Acrobatics, Acrobatics cripples the amount of armor that you're able to get on your character, and this means that Molten Shell is not a very viable option for your build. That's fine. Although Molten Shell is the strongest of the guard skills, there is nothing wrong with using either Steel Skin or Immortal Call. I suggest that you experiment with both. It comes down to personal preference. Some people like self-casting Steel Skin at level 20. This was what I did during the Legion League. You might prefer to have Steel Skin attached to cast when damage taken, in which case you'll need to balance the level of your cast when damage taken to your own needs. Alternately, you can go with Immortal Call as an alternate form of mitigation. None of these choices are right or wrong, and if you decide to go with a guard skill, definitely link it to increased duration. Next up we have a 4-link movement skill, Whirling Blades, linked to Fortify, linked to faster attacks, and then linked to your choice of Culling Strike or Blood Magic. I personally like Culling Strike as a way to just deliver the finishing blow to a tough enemy. However, for poison builds, usually you'll have stacked up enough poison that they're going to die anyway, so Blood Magic, although it will cost you a little bit of life to use the skill, it guarantees that even if you're out of mana for some reason, you can always get away from danger. So make your own decision there. And now we'll talk gearing. Firstly, you want to start with 4-linked rares while leveling. So 4 links become available at monster level 25 from memory, which means that it's either late Act 2 or early Act 3 that you'll start seeing them. When you see a 4-link that's in colours that you can use, pick it up, throw an Alchemy Orb on it if you've got one, or better yet, throw a low level Essence on it. Don't worry too much about stats while you're leveling. Once you do get into maps, eventually you'll find something a bit better. Keep with rare items for a while. Don't spend too much on gear that you're just going to quickly outgrow. When you get to endgame, you're going to want to have one of 3 things, in my opinion. The first option is that you can go with Cherubim's Maleficence. This has a powerful mixture of life and chaos damage on it. Potentially as much as 80% increased chaos damage, potentially as much as 100 life. It's a pretty solid item, it's also pretty rare. And I'm expecting a lot of poison builds will want to use this, so as a result, it may not be very available. Next option is Dendrobate. Dendrobate is the all-out offense option. The You'll notice here that it provides no life. It provides a few elemental resistances and a little bit of energy shield, but the main things that it does for you, it causes socketed gems to be supported by level 10 lesser poison. This adds a little bit of chaos damage, but also increases the mana cost of your primary skill, which will probably be a good trade-off in the end, but it's not as good as it sounds because you're already at 100% chance to poison. However, 75 to 100% increased damage with poison if you have at least 300 dexterity is great. Up to 25% increased poison duration if you have at least 150 intelligence. This is the all-out offense option. It scales poison damage on 2 different axes and it adds base chaos. For that reason, it is an excellent offensive choice. Your third choice is to just find a damn nice set of Elder armor and craft it up to have life and defenses on it, and any other utility effects that you can get on it that are useful. I think, in general speaking, the Elder chest will be the best way to go in the long run. However, Dendrobite will certainly have its uses too. So that's your chest piece. In terms of weapons next, we have the Wasp Nest is a unique item that becomes very cheap once the market gets flooded with them, but might actually be quite rare on day one. This is a very solid claw. It's a throat stabber. 40 life gain for each enemy hit by attacks is amazing. It's got solid physical damage. It adds chaos damage once you've already landed 5 poisons on an enemy, and it just has great attack speed, great damage. This is a very solid claw. If you can get your hands on this without paying the earth for it, then use it. Alternately, there are certainly some other options. So my suggestion is that you start with just any crappy physical weapon that you can get your hands on. You will be locked in by the passive tree to using claws. So essentially, pick up a Gemini Claw, the first Gemini Claw that drops for you in maps, scour it, use a few alteration orbs on it until you get some useful mods. Useful mods you're looking for are things that increase attack speed, or things that increase physical damage that the weapon deals. There is also a mod that comes in if you can use an item level 83 Claw, but you probably won't have access to those at this point. And that adds a lot of chaos damage to the weapon. You graduate from this crappy start of maps and the storyline / start of maps claw that you've been using to a claw that is found by getting the divination card set, the Rabid Rower. This drops from the tier 4 map, the Arid Lake, and it only drops from the map boss, and it has a high drop rate. When you turn in a set of 4 of this card, which probably only take you 10 runs of the map, you will be rewarded with an item level 83 Gemini Claw that is crafted with the Malicious mod, which is a high amount of added chaos damage. What you want to do with this Malicious Claw is throw an augmentation orb on it, throw a regal orb on it, and then if you don't have if you don't have attack speed on it already, craft attack speed from Helena's bench crafts. This will be a fine weapon to get going until you're able to procure yourself either a Wasp Nest or a truly great claw, rare claw. Ultimately though, what you want to do is get yourself a claw late game that is crafted using an Aberrant Fossil and a Corroded Fossil. Aberrant Fossils make you more likely to roll Chaos modifiers. Corroded Fossils make you more likely to roll both Poison and Bleeding modifiers. You don't want the Bleeding modifiers, they're a waste of time, but because you've got an Aberrant Fossil, you're 10 times as likely to get the Poison mods, and the Bleeding modifiers don't have anything boosting them. Ideally, you are going to want the Malicious roll, which is up to 72 to 123 Chaos damage, and it's not a rare roll, especially when you're using an Aberrant Fossil in the mix. And you are going to want the Delve specific, or the Corroded Fossil specific mod, 60% chance for poisons inflicted with this weapon to deal 100% more damage. This will be able to craft you a truly excellent claw, and it may also have the ability to curse enemies with level 10 Despair on hit, which is a bonus too if you get it. There's also the prospect of getting increased poison duration. This is great if you get it. Chance to poison on hit is unfortunately a waste of space, and increased damage with poison is also excellent too. So there's lots of mods that you could get, and as well as that, there's also all of the physical damage rolls, which would be fine if they come up. There's no real importance to using either a Shaper or Elder base here. So you can actually use a claw that you've sourced from the Rabid Rower Divination card on this crafting. Now that we've finished talking about weapons, you can also consider a couple of specific unique items in other slots. The main one that I want to talk about, and this one is going to be hard to get your hands on, is the Leper's Arms. So, the Leper's Arms is a unique item that drops from the Eradicator, one of the 4 Elder Guardians, and drops in tier 6 through 15 maps. I don't believe it drops from the tier 16 version, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. It can't be chanced, and it's not the most common drop. What it does is it gives you 40% increased duration of ailments on enemies, and a good chunk of maximum life. It also has this shared suffering mod, which is not really explained here, but it is a drawback. All damage you take from hits will cause you to be chilled, frozen, shocked, or ignited as appropriate, and elemental ailments that you inflict are removed from you. Now, because of the way the character is set up, you're not going to be able to inflict those ailments, and so that is a drawback. It's a considerable drawback, but I still think that this item is worth considering using. In terms of other slots, jewelry, you're mostly going to want to use corroded fossil crafts. Corroded fossils, again, provide incredible buffs to poison damage on jewelry, and so that's something that will really help you ratchet up your damage. Don't, of course, neglect life and resist, and do remember that anything you craft with a corroded fossil cannot roll elemental resistances. Corroded fossils completely block the potential of rolling any elemental modifier, and unfortunately that does include all of the elemental resistances. So if we have a quick look at the rings, for instance, and we put up what you can roll with aberrant and corroded fossils, you have the potential to get with corroded fossils 30 to 40% increased damage with ailments, and hopefully you can get that alongside life as well, and that'll be a solid start for an item. Ultimately, you can then look to go from that to something much better in the future. For jewels, again, you can do some pretty similar things involving crafting these using aberrant and corroded fossils again. That seems to be the thing to take away in terms of crafting rare gear for this build. Aberrant and corroded fossils will get you what you need. You still do need to get your resists somewhere, and I suggest that you consider going for your resists on your boots, on your belt, and potentially on your on a shield until you can get your hands on the Leper's Arms. If you've got any questions about this build, then definitely fire away, and definitely, because this is being planned before we've seen the skill in practice, I definitely want feedback from people that give it a go. I'll bring the passive tree up again, just so that you've got that conveniently at the end of the video. And if you've got any questions, definitely fire away. Otherwise, the time I'm recording this, it's 10 hours until Blight League starts, so it's time to get excited, get ready, and fire up, get yourself prepared, organize your Atlas strategies, plan out your build, and get ready to have some fun.